Hey everyone, we are just about to launch On Call with Dr. Mary Talley Bowden. Today, she is featuring Dr. Peter McCullough live in the studio and Dell Bigtree. Huge show here today, and we are so thankful for our sponsors over at The Wellness Company. We could not bring this show to you every week without their generous sponsorship, and we just love everything about The Wellness Company. Make sure that you use Mary's promo code MARY every time you shop at The Wellness Company. Go to twc.health/Mary. That is twc.health/Mary. And make sure that you guys get your emergency medical kits from The Wellness Company. We're moving into cold and flu season. Everyone is getting sick. If you do get sick, you don't want to miss work. You don't want your kids to miss school. You want to be able to tackle it and take care of it right away. And this is why the medical emergency kit is so important. You can match your symptoms to the doctor recommended guide and start treatment immediately. It is not a first aid kit. This is a mini urgent care in your home. So you're going to find 8 core prescriptions in the emergency medical kit that will treat over 30 conditions like COVID, strep throat, pneumonia, urinary tract infections, you name it, you can treat it with the emergency medical kit. No waiting rooms, no pharmacy lines, just modernized medicine right when you need it. So don't let illness catch you off guard. Order your kit now by heading to twc.health/Mary. That's twc.health/Mary. Use her promo code MARY, and you will save up to $30 off your kit plus free shipping. It is super easy and absolutely convenient. So thank you to our friends over at The Wellness Company. And without further ado, we're going to launch into On Call with Dr. Mary Talley Bowden.
Gold is hitting all-time highs. So why buy now? 2026 is starting off shaky with unrest in Iran, a criminal probe into the federal chair, and a weakening dollar. Gold is your top hedge against inflation, volatility, and chaos. Don't miss the momentum and help protect your wealth with physical gold via a trusted leader like Goldco. Goldco has over 8,000 5-star reviews, A+ Better Business Bureau rating, seamless IRA rollovers from 401ks, and secure IRS-approved storage. Goldco is offering my followers a free 2026 gold and silver kit and up to 10% back on qualifying purchases. Go to drmarygold.com to learn more. That's drmarygold.com. And I'm here with Dr. Peter McCullough. It's 2026. Trump has been in power for a year. We had high hopes. So what do you think? How do you score the progress that we've made in medical freedom in this past year?
I was asked that question when I left the U.S. Senate in May of last year, of 2025, and I gave Trump and RFK a B. I think it was a B+. I think I'd drop him down to a B right now. One of the observations that I've had is that among Trump's 15 cabinet members and his advisors, as well as the right-wing media, do you know there is no disagreement among them on any issue at all? None. None. No, you can't hear a single, no matter what geopolitical development or healthcare development comes up, there's zero disagreement. There is no other view outside of Trump's view. And I just want that to sink in, because, you know, when there are different points of view, then there's a discussion, and then there's discussion. We can find a path forward. Hopefully it's the correct path. I can tell you, I've been to the Politburo in Russia, and there is zero disagreement between Putin and the people around him. Zero. It's identical.
Well, I mean, we see this online. I mean, if you throw shade on Trump, you'll get attacked. I mean, Cat Turd blocked me just for, I don't even remember over what. But there are definitely, it has this cult-like behavior. You're not allowed to throw shade on Trump. And that's very interesting. I had not picked up on that amongst the cabinet members, but I can't say that I'm at all surprised.
But how about anyone? Listen, I'm a frequent contributor on Fox News, so I'm always running into the Fox studio. And any one of the media anchors who give a monologue, zero disagreement with anything the current administration is doing. Actually, even a little different take. They don't have a different take. It's called politics of the strong. And right now that exists with Trump in the United States. It exists with Putin in Russia, Netanyahu in Israel, and with the leader of North Korea.
Well, to be fair, was Biden, was he criticized by his own people when he was in office? I mean, I really didn't even pay that attention, but
I didn't pay that much attention. And, I tend to be probably like you on the right wing side of things. But I can tell you, Abraham Lincoln, who was a terrific president, probably, was in power over the most difficult time in our country. In the book by Doris Goodwin, Team of Rivals, that's exactly what he brought people around him who disagreed. Mm-hmm. And I certainly remember when Obama came in and he inherited the economic collapse from Bush and the real estate mortgage crisis. He had Tim Geithner, he had a lot of people around him, different points of view, and there was a lot of discussion on what to do. But we're seeing something different now. We're seeing a congealing and a lot of geopolitical rapid moves now, And I've completely lost track. I mean, I kind of lost track of the Epstein files and where that is, because now there's a Venezuelan abduction of the president. And then I kind of lost track of Venezuela because now there is a conquest for Greenland. And, it just keeps going and going and going.
Well, I will say, Tucker Carlson has been a little bit outside of that group, has had the courage to speak up, mm-hmm. got bashed for that, but then Trump invited him into the Oval Office. So there's that gives me a little bit of hope. And your comments made me think about medicine. And I was actually reviewing my book. It's about to get published, and I was reading a chapter from it this morning. And in it, I was reflecting on tumor board and how every week we met and we argued and we discussed and we debated. And that seems to have been lost in medicine. We saw it during the pandemic, mm-hmm. where dissenting opinions completely not allowed. So, and I know you've been through the ringer with that. How is your fight going professionally? Is everything settled down? How's your practice?
Well, let me just finish a thought on Trump. I'm not saying that this, total unanimous agreement with Trump, with everybody around him on the right-wing media. I'm not saying that's coming from Trump, by the way. It's called politics of the strong. When people recognize someone who they believe is powerful, they get into that mode. They realize for their own personal success, mm-hmm. they must agree. And the example you gave of, listen, Tucker Carlson kind of disagrees with Trump, and Trump and Tucker are friends and brought Tucker in the White House. Another example I would give is Zohran Mamdani. Obviously someone who has very different views of Trump. Trump had him in the White House. And the press was stunned when Trump goes, I think he's a pretty reasonable guy. So I'm not saying it's an indictment of Trump. It's just a sign of the times. You pointed out it's happened in medicine. Do you know there is zero disagreement on the messenger RNA vaccines among anybody at the Mayo Clinic or Harvard or Yale? There are no roundtable discussions on, where we are in the pandemic. Was it a good thing? Was it a bad thing? The primary care series, Pri-Med, the CME educational series, Nothing on the pandemic, nothing on vaccine safety or vaccine syndromes. So we're in a time now where people, in a sense, are very tribal. They choose a side, they choose a point of view, and they stick to it. And they really don't want discussion. When I, encounter my colleagues out there, there's just no interest in discussion on this. People can talk about their golf game or talk about, football, but they certainly don't want to talk about the COVID vaccines.
Yeah, it's really amazing. You would think social media would facilitate more discussion and break down those barriers, but maybe if anything, it's made it worse.
Well, you pointed out, and I think the same thing is happening to me, that there are forms of suppression algorithms being run on our accounts. So my account has, on social media across the platforms, has just been crawling in terms of accumulation of followers. Very, very different than a few years ago. And a lot of interactions and engagements are terminated by intrusive bots or other types of messages. People run programs on top of Twitter. Twitter itself, or X, has its own algorithms. And despite outward statements, there still is a suppression of any dissension on what's happened through the pandemic, particularly the vaccines.
Right. The algorithm just came out, and apparently all they have to do is mass mute you or mass block you, and your account gets completely pummeled. So if you are watching this now, please share it and get it out there, because COVID directly impacted every single American. It's a festering wound that is not going away. Mm-hmm. And if we cannot bury it under the rug. And I don't know about you, but I still see injured patients in my office on almost a daily basis.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I did today. Now, you asked about medical boards. I'm licensed in Texas and a few more states. And I see patients in my office here in Dallas and handle what I can over the phone. But we've all faced headwinds from medical boards and from credentialing agencies, and they've shown no signs of correction or capitulation, or certainly no apology whatsoever. It's happened, by the way, for companies where the Federal Trade Commission's gone after them. And again, there's been no explanation of what's gone on. So, I've been disappointed with the Trump administration and all the people in positions right now, and this lack of justice. And I can tell you another person who's really frustrated is Senator Rand Paul, who recently went on Joe Rogan. And Rand Paul said, listen, he wrote this book, Deception, which, by the way, is an excellent book. And he has all the evidence to have Fauci referred for criminal prosecution. And he won't. No one will pick it up. In the biomedical field, a lot of people are not too happy with Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, right now. We just haven't seen actions that are, in line with this sentiment we have in medical freedom. But I was going to comment today, had an executive who took, I think, 3 COVID-19 vaccines, had COVID several times. Because the vaccines don't work, people still get COVID, and each time they're getting a dose of the spike protein, this spine on the surface of the virus. They're getting it through the vaccine, they're getting it through the infection. The spike protein is retained in the human body. And sure enough, he's had blood clot after blood clot, pulmonary embolism. Some of these have happened on blood thinners. He's seen hematologists, he's seen many doctors like you. Most of the patients who see me, they have seen many doctors. Many have flown to the Mayo Clinic. They're getting no answers. He says, doctor, he goes, I have my antibodies measured against the spike protein. He was 13,000. He goes, I'm following you. He goes, I know the spike protein is in my blood clots. I know it's driving this process, and no doctor will level with me on what's going on here, and he's frustrated.
Yeah, it's a hard problem to fix. I feel like it's a lot of trial and error, and the government, has been very quiet. The NIH has been very quiet. These people are not getting any assistance from the government. 98% of claims that went to the CICP have been rejected. And at this point, unless somebody gets a shot within the last year, it's too late to get help from the government. And it's a very frustrating problem. Have any of the patients that you have seen for injuries, have any of them been reported to VAERS by other providers?
No, I'm always the person who reports it to VAERS. Sometimes I've had a very good patient report themselves, but I do the reporting to VAERS, and we're up to 19,500 deaths in VAERS. These are American citizens, and the vast majority reported by doctors like you and I, who have determined the vaccine is a cause of death. So VAERS is not a loose correlation. It is causation by proxy of reporting. I was on a podcast yesterday and someone was really challenging me. They said, well, isn't VAERS kind of like a correlation? It's not really causation. People use the word correlation. And I didn't have a good answer. I mean, she was a pretty skilled podcaster. She kind of had me on my heels. And I was flying back yesterday and I thought about it. A VAERS report is like a police report. A police report of a police officer who's filling out the report of someone who shot somebody else or committed a crime. It's not correlation. It's a report on what's happened. And that's what the VAERS reports. It reports on what's happened. Now, typically, VAERS has had 150 deaths per year with all the vaccines combined since 1990. Now we're at 19,500 with the COVID shots. Under the new Trump, RFK, Macri, Prasad, Bhattacharya, Oz administration, we've had 500 deaths. 500. So the thing is, once deaths accrue on someone's resume, on their record, and believe me, the deaths that have occurred this year, you can't blame on Biden, or you can't blame on FDA Commissioner Robert Califf. If the new administration inherited a biopharmaceutical safety disaster, which they did on day one, they were responsible for pulling the COVID vaccines off the market and initiating a safety review, initiating inspections of the remaining vials. They haven't done anything. And just like in geopolitics, remember I mentioned about being distracted from Epstein to Venezuela to Greenland? We're being distracted on this biopharmaceutical safety disaster. So in my view as a doctor and who I talk to at parties and social events, the biggest health issue on the table is Americans who've suffered injuries, disabilities, and deaths after vaccination. A Rasmussen survey says 56% of Americans think the COVID vaccines have caused large numbers of deaths. It's the biggest issue. Well, what have we heard from Health and Human Services about food dyes, fluoride, fats, and an inverted diet pyramid? And the list goes on and on. It seems like lots of small things, and we see our public servants on podcasts, but we never see them in their office actually doing work and administering health care in the United States. We have no significant research initiatives on vaccine injuries, disabilities, or deaths, no evaluation of the spike protein, which is accumulating in people. And we just keep hearing about these small, minor, I think relatively minor things. I personally don't eat Skittles. I've never given Skittles to my kids. I don't eat kind of bright red stuff. And so I understand food dyes are an issue. Okay, that's fine. But we've heard nothing out of the core people at HHF on messenger RNA safety and the COVID-19 vaccines.
Yeah. Did you see yesterday they pulled a vaccine off the market because of one death? It was a vaccine for some disease in Africa that none of us will ever see. But they pulled it after one death. Who do you assign the blame to for this?
I think that this whole messenger RNA development program, we just have to go back to the beginning. So in my book, Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality, we have 4 epochs of time. the last epoch that we're in is called the bioweapons era. It started with the BioShield Act in 2004, then the PrEP Act in 2005. It said, we are in the business of developing biological threats in laboratories, and we're in the business of creating countermeasures, that is vaccines and therapeutics and personal protective equipment to counteract these threats. This is the new warfare. And we're in this business. The PrEP Act says this. And so when this happens, and the PrEP Act fully anticipated the pandemic, it said that the countermeasures, are immune from liability, and they will be administered by government agencies. And if there are any casualties along the way, they're considered like military collateral damage. And so as this was packaged up, everybody is so accountable. BARDA, a military unit, in 2012 had a research program. It's called ADEPT P3. And it says, we will develop messenger RNA vaccines to end pandemics in 60 days. That was an aspiration. Now, no vaccine has ever ended a pandemic historically, ever. And so, that's 2012. That's not Trump and Operation Warp Speed. And then all the books that outline the creation of SARS-CoV-2 as one of these biological threats and the concurrent development of the vaccine, that's now all been fully exposed. So we're so far deep into this that I don't think anybody, particularly, anybody in Washington who now is in a position of power, is going to touch this. I think this is one of the untouchable things in Washington. And virtually everybody in Washington took a vaccine, by the way. Outside, I assume Robert F. Kennedy didn't. But I can tell you in the first administration, every single cabinet member took a COVID vaccine, and Trump took vaccines, except for Ben Carson. And I know that from a personal communication with Ben Carson. So self-participation matters. Once people take this stuff, they are very unlikely to now point out any flaws in it.
I agree, but I also think none of these people are giving these shots to their children or their grandchildren, and they're staying quiet about that, but they're not giving it to them, or they're no longer taking them because of safety concerns. So I believe that's sort of the litmus test that they're all failing. But yeah, it is a gigantic mess. I think at this point, we just have to, it's every man for himself. I don't think the government's going to solve this problem at all. I don't think Trump's going to pull these off the market. I don't think Kennedy will at this point. It's been a year. There's legislation I just got off a call about an hour ago. You're just basically eliminating all medical mandates as a fundamental right. Mm-hmm. That's probably the best that we can do. It's very common sense. And hopefully we can, make some traction in that direction. But, I just want to end on this. 5.5 million children have gotten the COVID shot in this new administration. So I just don't know how we're going to fix this.
Let me comment on that. I completely agree. I have very low expectations for the current administration. I mean, we've already had 1 year of effort. We've already had 25% of what we're going to see out of this. And what we've seen out of the administration, I think, is largely in response to our work. We're having a far bigger impact on public policy than they are. In fact, they're responding to us in many ways, including the McCullough Foundation. When we did this report on autism, there's no doubt we influenced the administration policy literally within a matter of days. So we're having a bigger impact than they are, and there won't be any fundamental changes. However, because we are changing public sentiment, that something like dropping all medical mandates or requirements to attend school or military or employment, dependent on taking a vaccine, if all that goes away, wow, we're going to see a big shift, because then people can make free choice. And what's really unknown is how much of vaccine acceptance is really because people want them, and how much is because they feel like they have to do this, that there's pressure or there's coercion, there's threat of reprisal, can't attend school, or the doctor's putting pressure on me. And so we know everything is oriented to try to minimize or abolish vaccine hesitancy. We know the WHO puts it on their website, so does the CDC. It says one of the biggest threats to public health is vaccine hesitancy. There's over 20 scientific instruments or ways to measure vaccine hesitancy, which in itself is its own disease. It is a mental psychological disease as proposed by public health officials.
They have an ICD-10 code for it, by the way.
Yeah. So when you think about this, everything the CDC does, it justifies if it's combating vaccine hesitancy. So let me give you an example. It's called the National Immunization Survey, NIS, and there's a fall respiratory virus module, okay? The CDC does not report to us the true numbers of who takes flu shots or COVID shots. They don't. They actually do a phone survey, a random digit dial phone survey. A robocall comes into households, and they keep calling and calling and calling until somebody picks up the phone and is willing to undergo an interview over immunization practices. And then they have a statistical modeling that does not allow the number they get, and they do it each week, the number they get each week of the percent takers, they don't let that number go down. It can only go up. So it is this accumulation. And so you can imagine a phone call comes in after calling 100 people, nobody picks up. Finally, somebody picks up and said, this is the CDC. Do you want to talk to me about vaccines? So someone who's far more likely to have accepted a vaccine is going to present themselves to the CDC and then engage. Well, the number that's coming up that the CDC says of overall population who took a COVID shot this last year, a booster, is 17%. That's based on this phone survey. I want to tell you, I'm an epidemiologist, I study this. That is far from reality. It is a contrived number. It's never been validated by going to some vaccine administration records. Listen, the government buys all the vaccines. They then ship them to the pharmacies. The pharmacies are administering the vaccines. Our government can tell us who took COVID vaccines and who didn't. They won't, because they don't want to injure or they don't want to promote vaccine hesitancy. So I did a Twitter poll. And now granted, people who follow me on Twitter, probably the sentiment is away from vaccination, but I paid attention to the replies, and the number I got was about 1% took a booster this year. And a lot of people answered, said, you know what, I took the first couple shots, but I'm now no longer taking boosters. So what's the truth, 17% or 1% or somewhere in between?
Well, I hope you're right. I hope it's lower than what we expect. I check every week. It's supposed to come out on Wednesdays. They're up-to-date data. And surprisingly, they haven't updated in a couple of weeks for some reason on the COVID shot, probably because I'm screaming about it every chance I get on X. But thank you so much, Peter, Dr. McCullough, for coming on. And it's always a pleasure. And we will have you back soon.
Thank you.
And next, we're going to have Del Bigtree to talk about this documentary, An Inconvenient Study, among other things. Better Business Bureau rating, seamless IRA rollovers from 401ks, and secure IRS-approved storage. Goldco is offering my followers a free 2026 gold and silver kit and up to 10% back on qualifying purchases. Go to drmarygold.com to learn more. That's drmarygold.com.
Hey everyone, absolutely fascinating interview with Dr. Peter McCullough, and I'll return the compliment. Dr. M, one of my favorite Twitter follows ever. Del Bigtree coming up in just a moment on Call with Dr. Mary Kelly Bowden. pretty star-studded show today, and we're so thankful for both of those warriors. We're also thankful for our sponsors, and I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the Wellness Company. We could not produce this show without the support of our friends over at the Wellness Company, and as you know, Dr. Peter McCullough works very closely with them, and one of his most amazing creations, Ultimate Spike Detox. As we know, millions have been poisoned and tragically are still being poisoned by the COVID mRNA shots. And this can obviously impact your heart health. And so many are still feeling off after their COVID vaccine or still getting COVID vaccines. And this is a problem. New research backs up this claim that even years after taking the COVID shots, you could have issues with your heart. In a groundbreaking study entitled Risk Stratification for Future Cardiac Arrest After the Jab, Dr. Peter McCullough highlighted an alarming rise in sudden cardiac events among young and previously healthy individuals. So his study found that tiny hidden patches of heart inflammation, often missed by doctors, could silently be building up, leading to sudden heart attacks during exercise or sleep, which is just terrifying. This is why Wellness Company created the 3-in-1 Ultimate Spike Detox. It's crafted with 100% natural ingredients, and it is specifically designed to help your body clear harmful spike proteins, reduce inflammation, and support heart health. So please do not wait until symptoms strike. Experience the only formula approved and used by Dr. McCullough, who, as we know, is one of the top freedom-fighting doctors who basically risked it all to tell us these truths. So go to twc.health/Mary. That is twc.health/Mary, and use that promo code MARY to get 10% off right now, plus free shipping. That's twc.health/Mary, and use that promo code Mary. Sorry, messed that up. Now we're going to get back to On Call with Dr. Mary Talley Bowden. Without further ado, Del Bigtree coming up in just a minute.
Hey, and Del Bigtree is here with me today. Great to see you, Del, and excited to talk about your documentary, Inconvenient Study. If you haven't seen it, it came out, I believe, in October, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just curious about the fallout. And as a background, it's a study comparing a large group of children, vaccinated versus unvaccinated. I believe it's the largest study of its kind. And it was done in collaboration with Henry Ford Medical Center, esteemed infectious disease doctor, Dr. Marcus Zervos. And at the conclusion of the study, it was not published. And Del, you uncovered that. Tell us a little bit more about the story behind the documentary and what has happened since then.
Well, the story really comes from, I was on tour with Vaxxed, which was the first documentary I made. I left my job as a producer on the CBS talk show The Doctors to put out Vaxxed. I was on tour with that film when we were going to be traveling up through Michigan, told me I can introduce you to the head of Henry Ford Health, Dr. Marcus Zervos. So I had dinner with him. I cover all of this in the film, but the film is about the fact that I challenged him in that conversation. You know, if vaccines are so great and you're pro-vaccine, why don't you do a comparative study comparing vaccinated to unvaccinated children, all of their health outcomes? It took years. That was 2016. I really started pressuring around 2018. By 2020, he finished doing that study. You used the term collaboration. Some people have said that I can collaborate. There was no collaboration. This was completely housed and, funded by Henry Ford Health and their head of infectious disease, Dr. Marcus Zervos. I think what makes this story so important is there's now around 10 studies worldwide of comparing vaccinated to unvaccinated, but they tend to, as all retrospective studies, which is a study that just looks back at data that's already happened versus setting up a study of, prospectively that chooses groups and can be a little bit more accurate in how it wants to sort of balance those groups. So there's always going to be some, issues with any retrospective study, but this is the 10th study of its kind. It's the first time it's really been done by what I think you could argue is a very pro-vaccine establishment in Henry Ford Health. They ran the Moderna trials, and a very pro-vaccine head of the study, Dr. Marcus Zervos, who was the head of the Moderna trials for Henry Ford Health, Moderna being the COVID vaccine. So, and he states that, and so we've never, and to me, this is the scientific method. I mean, you understand this. There's one thing, I think that all science has a potential bias to it, especially when studies are done. We're getting so used to hearing from the medical journals that 50% of this peer-reviewed science is not reproducible. Funding is involved. There's a lot of corruption. And so, what we know is bias is possible to affect a study. So I think it's important that if in any of these conversations now, that all sides bring forward their best evidence. And so in asking Henry Ford to do, essentially Dr. Zervos to do this, I was reaching out to the other perspective. This is not coming from, and look, Brian Hooker has done great studies. I think he does good science, but he has an autistic child. People will say that's affecting his bias. There's been others like Dr. Paul Thomas did a huge study of his own practice up in, I think it was Oregon. And, same thing. I mean, he's allowing children to not vaccinate. So you could argue that there was a bias there. I wanted to see this science done by someone that absolutely believed vaccines were great, that if there is going to be a bias, is going to push on the side of the vaccinated. And so when this study, wasn't being published, what that said to me is, why is it? I mean, clearly they must have, done whatever they could in this data to try and make the outcome look good for the vaccinated. And instead, I think it proves to be one of the most damning studies for vaccinations that has ever been published or not published or ever been done. Now, why didn't they publish it? He says it in his own words. As you know, at the center of the film, I couldn't get them to publish it, even though that was our agreement. I said, look, obviously the bias is on your side. I have no control over it. Just one rule: whatever you find in this study, publish it, and I'll accept that outcome. So when he didn't publish it, he was really breaking the trust and the agreement that we'd made. And after many, many phone calls, I realized I was running out of time. And so I called him, said, let's go to dinner. I brought hidden cameras and recording equipment, and I had him, explain, why aren't you publishing it? What's wrong with the study? And if you watch the film, you get to see it in his own words, which is, essentially he says, I can't think of, when I say, is there a better way to do this study? I can't think of any way you could do this study better. Is this study important? It's very important. Will you publish it? I'm not going to publish it because it'll be the end of me. It'll destroy my career. I say, if there was any other climate, obviously you're afraid of the climate that this study is being done in, where the pharmaceutical industry and the media attacks doctors for, like you, Mary, like Peter McCullough, who you just had on, all of these great people that really shouldn't be risking everything to tell us the truth, to give us their opinion on what they're seeing. But I said, if the climate was different, would you publish this as it is? He says, I would publish it exactly as it is. So what we hear and recognize is he is afraid of the establishment of science, the establishment of medicine, and that's why it's not getting published. So that's why I decided, to make a movie and show exactly what he said and show the public this really incredible study.
How did he share the data with you? How did you access the data?
He gave me when I went and had dinner, he gave me the study right there. You can watch it. It's the first time I see it. I know it's bad because he's telling me on the phone things like, Del, when I agreed to do this study, I did not realize I was agreeing to end the vaccine program. I've said, that's a pretty strong statement. What's in this study? He's like, it did not turn out how I had expected it would turn out. So that let me believe it's clearly not making the vaccinated look healthier. But I didn't get my hands on that study until we're at dinner. And you get to see that dinner in this film. and the hidden camera footage. But there was nothing I could do with it, really. I mean, it was really hard. That was there was still 2020 that came out. In 2022, I recorded them. I get handed the study. It's still, now it's 2026. This was released in 2025. People say, what took so long? I didn't see any way to legally publish that study. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. And in some ways, I think there'd be copyright issues. I also didn't want to undermine the study by having it come from me. I didn't want this to be an ICANN production or a Highwire or even a Dell Bigtree. It had nothing to do with me. I didn't touch this study. I didn't make this study. And if I, suddenly publish it, it would, everyone that calls me an anti-vaxxer would undermine what this study really represents. But we were given a way forward just in the summer, just last summer. Aaron Siri, my attorney that does all the work for the Informed Consent Action Network and the work that we do, he had a copy of the study and he handed it to Senator Ron Johnson. And it was Ron Johnson that said, look, I don't have a copyright issue because it's for the public good. I can publish this on the Senate website. And in fact, didn't even say I could, says I'm going to. And I'm also going to have a hearing on this in roughly a month and a half. And that's when I got a call from Aaron. If you're going to make a documentary, it has to be ready in a month and a half because Ron Johnson's going to have a hearing. I wasn't crazy about it. I would like to have a year to make that film. But under the circumstances, we said we're going to do whatever it takes. And frankly, I think the film turned out better because of it. There's things that, for instance, we had to keep the story so simple and to the point. I have a tendency, as you can probably tell right here, to be long-winded. I'm the same way. I want to prove every side of a point. But there were things in the film, since we didn't have much time, where I tried to explain COVID and the pandemic, and we just realized we don't have time for that. I can't get all the technical, the sound, the visual images to cover that part of the story. So it kept making us go back to what is just the simple point this film is trying to make. And it's really simple. There's never been a placebo prospective trial prior to licensure of any of the vaccines we've given our kids. In fact, it is less tested than the COVID vaccine. And that's a horrible thing to recognize. But that statement needs to be made clear so that we understand what the importance of these retrospective studies are, and then why this Henry Ford study is so important and how it all came about. So the film is very simple. It's less than 90 minutes long. It's the shortest movie I've ever made, but I think it is incredibly effective, and I'm very proud of it. It's nearing 100 million views worldwide. I have seen this study now debated in parliaments in England, in Australia. I watched Dr. Peter Gutcha, who is one of the founders of the Cochrane collaboration, which is, I think, one of the highest esteemed, or was one of the highest esteemed scientific bodies, debating it, saying, look, I've seen Henry Ford's complaints about this study, but it does not explain the size of the difference we're seeing between the vaccinated and unvaccinated groups. And just for people watching, the broad strokes are, the study finds that you're 2.5 times more likely to develop a chronic disease, either autoimmune or neurological disorder. You're 2.5 times more likely to develop a disease if you've been vaccinated, 6 times more likely to have a neurodevelopmental disorder if you've been vaccinated compared to unvaccinated, and nearly 6 times more likely to have autoimmune disease. And there's a graph that is really shocking in the study that shows, looking out 10 years, what are the odds, or, what is the percentage of vaccinated versus unvaccinated will have a chronic disease. Within 10 years, it's expected that 57% of children who receive at least one vaccine will have a chronic disease by the time they're 10 years old. And only 17% of the unvaccinated appeared that they would have chronic disease. So we're not, I mean, you're used to studies. I am. 25% increase, 60% increase. A 60% increase would be massive. This is 500% increased risks. I mean, it's just off the scale.
Well, I have to commend you. I had no idea you only had 90 days to whip that documentary out, and it was extremely well done. It made me cry. It left me with deep regret over vaccinating, being so compliant with my own children. So I really encourage everybody to watch it and share it. Is the study still available? Is it on Senator Ron Johnson's?
It's on the Senate. It's on the Senate website, but it's also on, if you go to inconvenientstudy.com, we've posted the entire study there. Anyone can download it. As you know, we've posted all of the cease and desist letter and accusations of defamation that we received from Henry Ford Health. We address their concerns with our response to those concerns and some of the things that the holes that people have tried to poke in the study. We are trying to, be as transparent as possible. Look, every study should be challenged. I'm happy to have the study challenged by all sides. I'm really happy with the debate that's happening online internationally over this study. But I would say this, no matter what holes you can poke in it, there's only one way to really overcome what we're seeing there, and that is someone in the world is going to have to do a similar study comparing vaccinated to unvaccinated and show us that in their study, the vaccinated are healthier, because this study's been done 10 times now, and every single time, no matter who does it, and this being obviously by the most, I think clearly pro-vaccine. It's my opinion that they're pro-vaccine based on what Dr. Marcus Zervo says himself and what the establishment at Henry Ford has done. But at this point, I think the results are so shocking. People like Dr. Peter Gutcha are saying this study needs to be reproduced all over the world. It needs to be reproduced by Kaiser Permanente and all of the health data they have. It needs to be reproduced by Harvard, medical schools, the Harvard Pilgrim system. It should be reproduced by CDC. It should be reproduced by NHS in England. I think every major medical institution and every single government regulatory agency that has this data should compare vaccinated to unvaccinated, make that data transparent. I would love for Henry Ford to make this data transparent so that people can pick through it and really know, what are we actually looking at here? This is how science should be done, and it's not being done this way. And so I'm happy with all the challenges, and I think that this study really does stand up when you look at those challenges.
Have you heard from Dr. Zervos since you aired the documentary?
I have not heard from him. I did not. I was being interviewed by a major media institution recently, and that reporter told me that they reached out to Henry Ford Health. And look, this writer is probably doing a hit piece on me, is definitely pro-vaccine, and said they would not allow any access to Marcus Zervos. So that is the closest you could get. That was a friendly, I guess, for their side, and they're not letting him speak to anybody. I also want to point out that when we received the cease and desist letter, Henry Ford was unaware at that moment. They were trying to stop the film from coming out. They were unaware that I had hidden camera footage of the head of the study. So when they were making statements, their statement is essentially that the reason it wasn't published by Henry Ford Health is that the data was not good data, and that it didn't meet the scientific rigors that they expect, or to have happen in studies done by Henry Ford Health. They said all of that prior to me talking to Marcus Zervos and having him say the study is as good as you could possibly do it. It's their own data from Henry Ford Health. So if their data is not good for that study, I don't know then what's wrong with the data. And ultimately, he is saying that he is not publishing it. And by the way, he has the power to publish it outside of Henry Ford Health. He's in a position to do that. He is not publishing it because of what the study results are and what he believes that would do to his career. Those are his words, not mine. I think that that's very important to know.
Yeah. So they sent you a cease and desist, but I guess there's been no follow through on that.
No follow through on that. I think that, to bring a defamation case, I don't think any of us want to see that happen. I think that, and I don't think that there's really much of a case there. I think the fact that the lead head of this study is making all the statements that the film does. We're like, what really, and I think you've watched it. We don't overstate what is there. I make it very clear that this study says what this study says, that it is not published, You can listen to the lead scientist in the film say why it isn't published and come to your own conclusions. And I want to make it clear, as I say at the very end of the movie, does this study prove that vaccines are causing this chronic disease epidemic? No, it does not prove that. What it shows us is a major signal, a very important signal. I think the fact that, as I said, it's one of 10 others like it, the body of these studies start really leaning you towards the fact that we really may have a problem here. But what it should ignite is a movement worldwide for every human being to demand that their regulatory agencies do this exact study. Because if this study proves to be true, and vaccines are making us 200% more likely, doubling our increased risk of having a chronic disease in our lifetime, then it's doing the opposite of what it was designed to do. This vaccine program, was supposed to make our children healthier. And as you know, as we've all reported, our children are not healthier. Our children are the sickest we have ever seen them. Especially in America, it's the sickest children in the industrialized world. If you take malnutrition out of the equation, it probably makes our children the sickest in the entire world. We have the best hospital systems in the world. I thought we had the best food supply in the world. I thought we had the best water systems in the world. And we thought we had the best vaccine programs in the world. So if that's not working, and our kids have gone from 12% chronic disease. 12% of them had a chronic disease in the 1980s. We're not talking some bygone era. When I was a kid, 12% of us had chronic disease. Now that is going over 50%. Some stats show 54%. I think the Trump administration saying 40%. They're not including, I think, obesity in there, which takes the whole thing over the edge. And I think the CDC just reported that Americans are now hitting, I think it's 76% of us have chronic disease. Something has gone tragically, tragically wrong. And I think it all should be on the table. And what this study shows us is, of all the things that you're going to keep out of the discussion of what is causing this chronic disease epidemic, it most certainly should not be vaccines. At the very least, this signal tells us that has to be on the table with fluoridation, with plastics, with forever chemicals, with glyphosate and herbicides and pesticides on our crops. I believe I'm praying that that's what Robert Kennedy Jr. is doing, is getting investigations and studies done on all of these factors that are obviously contributing to an environmental crisis that is making our children sick and us sick.
Have you had any conversations with Jay Bhattacharya? Could the NIH run the study?
I have not talked to Jay Bhattacharya. I mean, as you know, I was director of communications for Robert Kennedy Jr. Now that he is in that position, I essentially stepped away because I'm a journalist, and if I have the inside scoop, I'm going to have to tell it. So I've made it clear. Let me go ahead and judge this from the outside like everybody else has. I will say this, that I know Bobby very, very well, and the work that he is doing isn't just because we're complaining about the vaccine program now, or we're showing issues in studies with autism, or because of Henry Ford Health. The entire reason he ran for president was because he had an issue with this vaccine program on top of glyphosate. He has brought his own cases on pesticides, herbicides, on fluoridation, all of these things. So we have the exact right guy in there to look at all of these things. But I think we're also watching complications inside of an administration that probably likes some of this and not other things. I'm really disheartened to see that the Supreme Court is going to take up the issue of the possibility of giving liability protection to Bayer, Monsanto, and others for pesticides on crops that is being promoted and was pushed forward by our own Department of Justice inside of this Maha administration. Somehow the government decided to ask the Supreme Court to weigh in on something that is clearly already being decided in courts. This product is causing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they're losing billions of dollars over it. They should not get liability protection. But I do want people to pay attention to this, because this is exactly what happened with the vaccine program. You are taking a product that was destroying lives, that they said we're losing so much money from death and injury cases on vaccines, we can't make a profit. The exact same argument that Bayer Monsanto is making right now. And our government stepped in, didn't say, hey, sorry, make a healthier, safer product for our kids. They said, great, you know what? We're going to step in and give you liability protection. That is what is now, we're watching it all in real time happen again. This is the corruption of government. This is a corporate corruption of government. No one in America should want this. I can't imagine anyone walking down the street wants to have a free ride on pesticide, herbicide companies that, even if it kills people, causes cancer, causes problems, poisons our children, that you can't sue them. That is not a free market. I don't know why Donald Trump would support that. That is not a libertarian value. It's certainly not a conservative value. I don't think it's an American value. Our system is based on freedom, and it's a free market system where I can sue if you hurt me. You can get lawyers. If I win, you can decide to either take your product off the market or make a better product. That is how this works, and it's why I think this vaccine program is so problematic. It has got a protection that nothing else has, and now we can see, are we going to give more poisonous products liability protection? That certainly is not the American way.
Yeah, I mean, we have so much work to do. I don't think most people realize that we are not protected from medical mandates going forward.
Right.
The Supreme Court has yet to rule on that, so they could pull what they pulled on us during the pandemic at a moment's notice. But I really appreciate all the work you have done. This film is incredible. Everybody should go get it and watch it. Is it free still?
It's free. It will always be free. You know, this is the work that my nonprofit does based on the people, you know, that donate every single month to make this work happen so that we can continue these investigations. We are bringing more lawsuits, I think, than any nonprofit. We have 90 lawsuits right now for medical freedom across the country. We're deep in a battle to bring back the religious exemption in West Virginia, which we won. We won in court just a few weeks ago, right before the holidays. But ACLU is fighting us. I mean, we've got all sorts of groups moving in, so they've moved it into the appellate court. So we're in the fight of our lives. But as you know, I am fighting for medical freedom. You have the right to choose. You have the right. You want to poison your kids on some level. If you believe vaccines are safe, that's your decision to make. But you can't force your belief system on me. You can't force me to inject me or my children with any products, or we're not free citizens. Then we have the same exact rights as a farm animal. A cow doesn't get to decide whether it's vaccinated or not. And right now, in 5 states for sure, California, Connecticut, West Virginia at the moment, Maine, New York, you're a cow, like you're a farm animal. They're injecting you and your children. You have no freedom. I'm sorry. But in the rest of the states, we can opt out of that mandate. But I'm with you. Until we have ended mandates, and by the way, if we really want to copy the Denmark schedule, which Robert Kennedy just, did, essentially, we just dropped the Denmark schedule, which is fantastic. It's the greatest shift in our vaccine program we have seen in my lifetime. It's cut us from 54 injections down to 23, which is a huge step in the right direction, but follow all the way through. How about Denmark doesn't mandate it? And I want that part of the Denmark schedule. I don't think any of these remaining vaccines, none of them should be mandated upon us. It should be a choice. So you're right. There's a lot of work to do.
We need to follow in Russia's footsteps. They do not mandate the shots.
Isn't that amazing?
Russia does not mandate the shots, so we need to follow in their footsteps.
I agree.
Thank you so much, Del. We could talk for another hour. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I really appreciate you coming on and love to have you back on soon.
Thank you for your, true voice out there. Thank you for the sacrifices that you've made. And for everybody, please go to inconvenientstudy.com, and you can actually buy little cards that you can hand out to that pregnant mom at a store. this is, you know, and just say, hey, you should watch this movie. We really want to see everyone in the world get this information because, as Peter McCullough said, the power is in the people. There's only so much Robert Kennedy Jr. is going to do, but we need to keep that pressure up in our court systems in this country. We are shifting the consciousness around these conversations, but that shift is made better every time we get a new person enrolled and recognizing that we need to stand side by side. I think this film is an amazing tool to do that. So I hope everyone goes to inconvenientstudy.com and takes advantage of its existence.
Great. Thank you. We'll leave it in the comments. Good to see you again, Del.
You too.
And that's it for today. Thanks for joining. Please check out our sponsors. They make this show possible, Goldco and the Wellness Company.